We're going to pull up this video that Gavin Newsom posted.
This is a great video.
This is, you got to watch this commercial. I got to be honest. I thought it was, I was like, there's nothing you can say that would convince me this isn't meant to be parody, but I hope you enjoy.
We're almost there. You're gonna make it.
Trump Republicans want to criminalize young Alabama women who travel for reproductive care.
Miss, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle, take a pregnancy test.
Stop them by taking action at
Firstly,
Wait, look at her face.
Campaign for Democracy group is responsible for the content of this advertising.
I just want to say I love the idea of a horror film where you're supposed to sympathize with the murderers. But secondly, the idea that a police officer is going to pull you over, why don't you take a pregnancy test? Tim, you didn't think it was, you thought that was a parody? What if I told you that that's found footage? that's dash cam footage. That's what happens.
She's looking at the camera.
And men can get pregnant. So they pull men over and tell them to take pregnancy tests too.
Dude, there's a couple wild things about this. Abortion doesn't register as a very large issue politically. I take that back. It is a big issue. But immigration and economics and inflation, I mean, these things are the dominant ideas. And it seems like the Democrats' only thing is like, let's scare women on abortion, I guess. Mm-hmm. They already have the female vote. 70% of millennial women are Democrat. Gen Z women trending Democrat. Maybe this is why, but it kind of feels like, is that all you got? And then they make the most ridiculous commercial ever. It's just like, look, you could have made a convincing commercial where they actually just showed news reports where you had politicians saying, we will not allow women to seek abortions in other states. But to make this ridiculous commercial where she's like, the cop wants her to pee on a test strip in public. I don't know what that's all about.
Also, the idea that it is some horrible, evil thing, like just set aside the abortion issue, which you all know I never do, but the idea that it's horrible or evil or dystopian to say you cannot cross state lines to commit a crime in another state. This would be like if the NRA released the commercial where it's like, did you know the Democrats want to make sure it's illegal to go commit a gun crime in another state and then go back to your state? Yeah, no, that's not shocking because that's generally how the law works, right? You're not supposed to be able to skirt it in that way.
Well, here's an interesting thing.
I do want to mention this. You look at a commercial like this and you hope, well, that's just too silly. People are going to think that that's ridiculous. But as Tim has put in the past, these are the people who believe Jussie Smollett. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I do think it's interesting, though, is that in Texas, for instance, there's no casinos. But right on the border with Oklahoma, they have one of the biggest casinos in the world. It is common knowledge that if you live in Texas, where it is illegal to gamble, you cross state lines to commit a crime. But it's not a crime in Oklahoma. Nobody cares. There's a big difference between killing and gambling, right?
Yeah.
And so the debate for Alabama is they believe a murder is being committed. You can't cross state lines to go commit a murder. But it is interesting how we have selective enforcement of which crimes we think should or should not be warranted if you cross state lines to do them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Like Rittenhouse crossed state lines, and that was the worst thing anyone ever did in all of history, right? Like the whole question of whether or not he defended himself hinged on whether he had crossed state lines earlier. And then it turned out the media lied about that too. But of course, they're totally inconsistent. They don't actually care.
Right.
They just want it to be legal to kill babies, and they also just want to use this.
Right. They're not explaining the issue. They only want to rally around the word abortions because every mainstream media outlet going into 2024 said this is the biggest issue of the year, even though it's obviously not. That's not what voters are responding to. But additionally, I never hear about Democrats in Alabama being like, fine, if you're going to take away abortion, then add additional funding to the pill, giving out condoms free. Like, there's no alternative. It's just about abortion. It's not about improving the lives or reducing risks for women. It's about this one singular issue. They don't care about you. They care about the word abortion and being on the right side of it.
I got an idea. Seamus, I think you'll say yes to this. You want to make a counter commercial? I have an idea.
Would love to make a counter commercial.
But it's not going to be funny. It's going to be...
I have done counter commercials.
Right. Well, here's the idea I have. How about we remake this, and it's a guy bawling his eyes out in a police station, begging them, please help me. And the cops are like, sir, and you don't have to know why. He's like, just please, whatever you can do. And the cops are like, sir, we're doing everything we can. Man. And then you have the woman driving in the car, speeding, heading towards the state border, and a cop pulls her over, and she guns it. Then cop pulls in front of her, stops her, gets out, and he's like, are you name? And she's like, yes. He's out of the car now. She gets out 8 months pregnant, and she was fleeing the state, trying to leave her husband and get an abortion at 8 months.
I think it's a good... Here's what I think you'd have to do to really make it gut-wrenching. She has to actually get away with it, right? Like, she leaves and she goes and has the abortion. And the cop's like, well, there's nothing... Like, yes, your child has been terminated.
She goes into Colorado.
Yeah.
And then the guy's just screaming and crying and screaming why. And then she says something to her friend like, he was the wrong guy for me.
But the left would still love that commercial because they would just be happy that they're getting to see a baby get terminated.
Well, I mean, that's a little hyperbolic, but they would still like the idea. Be like, yeah, like, yep, it's her choice.
Like she should be able to. Yeah, exactly. They would have to defend
and the
that.
cops, and the reality of it is the cops are going to say, we can't go into Colorado and arrest her. She's in a different state now. If she comes back, maybe we can pursue charges. And the guy is just going to be crying.
Too late
and be
at that
like,
point. Yeah, baby's
like,
gone.
8 months. The baby could have lived. I don't understand why she decided to kill it. And then it cuts to her saying to her friend, like, I realized that he was the wrong guy for me. And if I had this kid, I'd be stuck with him forever.
Well, we need to get better about how we message to women in general. Like, there are some issues that we're not going to win. And so, for example, the way that you heard me earlier talk about Lake and Riley, I'm doing that very specifically. I want to always bring up that a daughter was stolen. She was stolen from us. And I'm using that word, I'm saying daughter, because I want to appeal to every father, every brother, every uncle, etc., that a woman was stolen from their life. And furthermore, why don't we even play with it a little bit when we're trying to appeal to men talking about war? Why are we not saying to women, to girls, send your boyfriend to war, vote for Joe Biden, and using that kind of reverse psychology, talking about it that way, where we're talking to women, but we're also talking to men at the same time.
Yeah, I think it is very different. I mean, men and women's brains work differently. I know I'm going to get canceled for saying that. No, I'm just kidding. But the appeal to emotion it can work on men, but it's definitely something that people know works with women. And I think one of the worst issues, especially when it comes to any conversation around children, reproductive issues, abortion, is it's all fear-based. It's to tell women somebody's after you, and if you don't do this, you're ruining the lives of every other female out there. But it's never to address the things that I think women are actually concerned about. And I think you're right. If we were talking about war, saying like someone you love could die because of this, they would vote differently. And I think similarly, it is interesting to me that instead of approaching the abortion issue logically, being like, okay, if the goal is that women shouldn't have to have children they don't want, we want additional funding for free birth control, right? I think the pill is evil. I'm not saying that's what I would do, but theoretically, if they're trying to prevent a woman from having a kid she doesn't want, there are other avenues for that. But instead, it becomes about this one issue they want to keep on the table. It's not about the women, and the logic doesn't follow because it's actually about manipulating them. It's about the emotional control.
That's right. And so it's interesting because according to some data, women are more likely to call themselves pro-life. So there's this question here, well, why is it that this is an issue that Democrats always campaign on to try to get the female vote? And I think a large part of it is they do this scaremongering where they make women think that there are medically necessary procedures that they will not be able to get because of some anti-abortion law that was worded improperly, perhaps intentionally so because Republicans just hate women. But I think your idea is good, Tim, the one we were talking about earlier with this commercial, because the unfortunate reality is Republicans have just abandoned the abortion issue and they've failed to message on it in a way that says, no, actually, we have the moral position and what you're doing is evil. They almost want to sweep it under the rug and not talk about it because they don't have faith.
They gave up.
They totally gave up. They don't have faith that they can convince voters that abortion is wrong. They go, well, we have our victory and we're just going to be quiet about it and hope nobody notices. You can't do that. And that's also not how you win in politics. You have to assert that your position is correct instead of trying to hide from it.
Exactly. I think the Republicans have admitted they've admitted two things, one of two things, that they know they've lost the argument entirely. And so Trump comes out and says what I believe to be the politically appropriate response considering, and that's we'll leave it up to the states. Because he's between a rock and a hard place with the moral position of Republicans and trying to win over states that are attacking him on the issue. I believe the principled position would be to directly assert your moral position, period, to try and win the argument. That if you are pro-life, you should be saying outright 100%, we don't think this should be legal. But the fact that Republicans aren't saying that says they don't think the majority of Americans agree with them, and so they're basically dropping it.
And people know that people also are aware that that's a dishonest tactic. It's like you're hiding the ball.
Well, now, and let me add this real quick, too. The idea that Bill Maher said this, and I agree with him, although Bill Maher said it was murder and he agreed with it, which is insane. He actually said it is kind of murder, but I'm okay with it because we had 8 billion people. And I was like, whoa, jeez, dude. But the issue is you cannot come out and say abortion is murder and states should be allowed to decide whether they allow it.
Exactly.
No way.
Completely agree with you.
You've either got to say we don't think it's murder, or you've got to ban it. Like, I don't know. I don't know what position Republicans are going to take on this one.
You don't get to have a moderate position on an issue like that. And the thing is, Democrats actually realize that. The Democrats don't have moderate position. And they're saying up until the moment of birth for any reason. And so Republicans have to be saying never.
But I'll push back a little bit, too, and say the Supreme Court has to rule on this. I don't know that overturning Roe v. Wade was the right or wrong decision. At first, I thought, okay, maybe it's good that it'll go to the states and we can federalize a little bit. States can do it as they want. And then we actually got into this discussion over personhood and whether or not an unborn is a person as it pertains to the 14th Amendment.
Yeah.
And then all that matters is this. I'm not going to tell you whether it should or shouldn't be. I'll take a neutral position on it for the sake of this argument. The Supreme Court needs to answer whether an unborn child qualifies as a person under the 14th Amendment. Because the 14th Amendment says that the state, the government, shall not deprive a person of life, liberty, and property without due process. The question then becomes, is a baby, unborn, a person as it pertains to the United States, to this country under the Constitution? The question's got to be answered. I don't know if they'll say yes or no. There have been previous rulings in the past where there have been inclinations of yes. We'll see where that goes. But the implication is serious. If the Supreme Court rules that an unborn baby is a person, a woman would not be able to get an abortion for any reason unless she went to a court of law and got approval from a judge.
Well,
then they like directly gave the baby the death penalty instead of just allowing all of them to get it at any time.
But
that would be great. Yeah, but
this would pertain to, it wouldn't be a doctor's decision. It wouldn't be it wouldn't be an issue of rape, incest, or health of the mother. It would be going to a judge and saying, for this reason, we qualify for an abortion. The judge saying yes or no.
Well, I think in that kind of a situation, that would be just as likely as someone being able to get a death warrant signed for a child that had been born. If the courts rule that a child is a person, which I, of course, believe they are, and I believe all unborn children are people, then I don't think you would even have cases where it would be allowed.
Well, the question is...
I get what you're saying with like medically necessary. So
Right.
this is something we
I
talked about before on the show.
Stress.
Yeah,
Seamus can assert his moral position. I'm not saying they should or should not do this. I'm saying we need an answer as to whether, like, look, half the country is saying it's murder, half the country is saying it's not. The Supreme Court has to answer this question because this is a personhood question as it pertains to literal human life.
Yeah. I think one argument that the left makes, and I've talked about this in the show before, so I'll try to make it quick, but just to kind of keep audience members up to date if they're not aware of this, one of the most effective pieces of rhetoric for the left is this idea that there are these medically necessary abortions, that mothers will die if they're not allowed to have them. It's actually not true by definition. Abortion is the direct and intentional killing of the unborn child. There are certain medical procedures a pregnant woman might need that could unintentionally result in the unborn child dying. So, for example, if a woman is pregnant, she needs a surgery. The surgery could result in a miscarriage, but it's going to save her life. If she has the surgery and miscarries, that's sad, but that's not an abortion. That's not the same thing. And so that's not what Republicans are trying to ban. What Republicans are trying to ban is directly going in there and ending the life of the child. But the left makes it sound like the right is trying to ban medically necessary procedures by calling them medically necessary abortions, but they're actually literally not abortions.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.